Hello everyone, I hope you're doing fantastic today. I'm Cool Cat Terry, and today I want to go over how to replace your spark plugs in your BMW. First things first, let's go over all the different tools that you may need for your project. I went ahead and laid out some of the basic items that you may need. Now, depending on your vehicle, you may need some other supplies. And changing spark plugs is pretty straightforward, and this will apply to pretty much any car, not just BMW. So let's go ahead and see what we would need. First off, I would always highly recommend you get your owner's manual, because this is going to be your #1 tool to find out what type of spark plugs your vehicle takes. Next up is you're going to want a spark plug gauge. Now, there are different types depending on the type of plugs that you will need. I have to use platinum plugs, so this is the type of gauge you would use for those. Another common one that you would see is one that just looks like a big coin. Those are for copper plugs. Do not use those on platinum plugs. It will destroy the little platinum tips. All right, so this is the one you would want to use if you have platinum plugs, as well as this will work with your iridium. Now, you would also want to have some spark plug boot protector. This is going to make sure that your coil doesn't get stuck to your plugs. This comes in handy, and this will be something that you can use on any vehicle. Highly recommend you get this. You can also get another packet just like this that would have Anti-Seize in it, and that will help as well depending on what kind of plugs you have. Make sure you do the research. I use NGK plugs right here, and NGK, I've already done the research for you all. If you use NGK brand spark plugs, they already have a very special zinc coating on the threads that act like an anti-seize. So you do not add anti-seize to NGK plugs. If you're using a different brand of plug, go ahead and check out what the manufacturer recommends in their case. All right, you're also going to need a 10mm socket so we can remove the engine cover. You're going to need a special socket right here. This is a 5/8 3/8 drive spark plug socket. It'll have a special little slot in there for the plug to get into. Can't really see with this lighting, but you got to have a special spark plug socket, and these do come in different sizes, so keep that in mind depending on what you may need for your vehicle. You're going to need a socket wrench as well as some extensions. Now, you may also want some shop towels just in case you might have some oil or anything around your plugs. You're going to want to clean that up. And I also recommend a torque wrench, so that way you do not over tighten your spark plugs, because then if you over tighten your spark plugs, you can damage the cylinder head, and you just don't want to do that. So make sure you look up what your torque specs are. This is where your owner's manual comes into play. I'll show you here on my owner's manual. I think they had mine near the back here. So I always write my own specs in as well. So right here under spark plugs, it says NGK BKR6 EQUP, which is exactly what I have. And I have a 6-cylinder, so I have 6 plugs, 4 in this pack, and then these 2 here. And then I already did the research, and the torque spec for my plugs is 22 foot-pounds or 30 Newton meters, depending on which measurement you tend to use in your country. Now that we got that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into the removal of my spark plugs. All right, so the first thing you're going to want to do is open up the hood. I haven't ran the car at all, so everything is nice and cold, so I won't have to worry about any hot surfaces. So with my car, I'm going to have to remove my strut brace, so I have to grab an additional tool, and that's to get my hex bit socket set so I can remove my brace. And then once I get that off, then we will remove the engine cover, and then we'll go from there. All right, so I got my hex bit socket set right here, and I'm pretty sure the strut brace that I have uses a 5/16. So let's go ahead and remove the brace. Okay, and I do have chrome, and I don't want to get it all messed up, so I will have a towel here as well, so I'm not filling this up with fingerprints. Oops, if I have it on loose and not tighten. All right, now with that removed, I'm going to switch over to my 10mm socket, and we'll start removing the engine cover. And you will want a little bit of an extension, just so you, because some of these little spots are kind of deep. Forgive me, guys, I did forget to mention that you will need to have a screwdriver so you can remove these little plastic caps. And they'll just pop out. Just look for, there'll be a groove on the side that you can get in underneath. And there'll be 4 caps total. They'll just look like that. 4 little caps. Just gotta pop those off. So you have little bolts and washers on the top. So the top cover, I have actual bolts. And the bottom cover or side cover is just some nuts. Now I don't have a magnetic socket, so I have to be careful not to have these fall. So I'm trying to do it by hand once they're loose enough. Now you can remove the engine covers. This one I'm only removing because it kind of overlaps the one I need. But otherwise you don't really need to remove this one. And then the final step to removing this one is you have to remove the oil cap. That was on there super tight, my goodness. And then I'll put the oil cap back on just so nothing gets down into the engine. Here we have our M54 engine. This is how it will look for the straight line 6. All of our coils are right here nicely in a row, going from 1 to 6. Very simple changes. Now, depending on what vehicle you have, because this changing spark plugs, like I said, this doesn't have to be BMW specific. If you have a straight line 6 on certain vehicles, for example, I used to have a 2004 Chevy Trailblazer that had a straight line 6, and the 6th cylinder was all the way in the back underneath the cowl. You will need special tools to be able to reach that 6th plug once you get the coil out. So keep that in mind. Now, if you have a 4-cylinder engine, it could vary depending on the type of engine you have. Sometimes they'll have them alternating in 2 rows, sometimes in the front, sometimes they might have them in the back. Do some research on your engine if you are new to working on cars, so that you can, know where to look for your ignition coils. Now, when you remove your ignition coils, you want to keep track of which ones go where. Now, even though it says there's high voltage here, it is actually not recommended to disconnect your battery. That it's actually easier to change the plugs with the battery connected. All right, so the steps that you will take is you will have these 2 10mm little bolts right here that you'll need to remove. You have this ground on this one, and there's a ground on number 6. So you need to remove those. And then you have this connector right here. This you just pull up, and then this electrical here will disconnect, and then you can remove the entire coil. I'm going to go ahead and loosen the bolts first, starting with the ground here. I might need to put my extension back on. I was hoping I wouldn't need it, but I'm kind of hitting things, so I'm going to put the extension back on. All right. This is what the first one will look like. And now that ground is disconnected. Now I'm going to pull it. I'm going to leave this one on because I'm going to have to pull, and then I don't want that being loose yet. So what I'm going to do is you just need to pull these up. Now to remove the coil pack, I got the ground disconnected, and before I move this one, I want to remove this here. Now I have seen some people will leave the wiring, the ignition coil like wiring harness attached, and they'll pull it out. It will be a tighter way to do that, and they kind of have to bend it. I do not recommend doing that. You risk damaging the coil. So just separate the wiring here, and it'll be a lot easier to remove. Now this, you have to pull it straight up. Now it is pretty tight, and I personally am not able to get it to come up. So another way you can go about it, if you're not able to get that loose by hand, is just take a screwdriver. Let me see if I can get it from the top. There we go. And then once that's up, just wiggle, gently wiggle this loose. And now your plug will be disengaged. And the M54 engine is designed very well to where you won't have to keep track of where your wires are. This is such a short distance. This can only go to number 1. Other vehicles, you'll have long coil, they'll have the long wiring with the coils, and you'll have to keep track of where they go. This one is a lot more convenient. The wire can only reach the one it goes to. Just remove this other 10mm right here, and we'll pull the coil pack out. Now, you may also want to have a magnet handy just in case you do drop one of these. Now, depending on your vehicle, you can remove every single coil pack and you can line them up in a row. I don't want to have to worry about mixing things up, so I'm just going to do them one at a time. So I'm going to do this one. We'll check it all out. Go ahead, and now we can pull out Give it a little wiggle. Try to get that boot loose and pull straight up. And my guess, based on how snug this is, whoever changed the plugs last didn't put that boot protector on that I mentioned, because then this would slide off very easily. Boy, she's a tight one. Keep wiggling it a little bit and trying to get loose. All right, I'm gonna need both hands. There. And that there is your coil pack. Yes, that should not have been that tight. So we're going to make sure to put that boot protectant on, so that way the next time these plugs get changed, it won't be that much of a hassle to pull this off. All right, once that coil pack is removed, you can take a look inside. You want to look to see if there's any dirt or any kind of moisture, whether it's water, fuel, oil, any of those things. And mine is not only super clean, it's hard for you guys to see, I apologize. Mine is super clean as well as super dry, which is exactly what we want. So that's good there. If you happen to have any dirt or any kind of debris down there, go ahead and get your shop vac and suck that out. Do not remove the plug when there's dirt in there. It's going to fall down inside your engine, and that's a big bad. Don't do that. If you see any kind of fluids in there, a common one would be oil. If there's oil mixed in with your plug, that means the valve cover gasket is bad, and I would recommend going ahead and changing that gasket out and then change your plugs. This way, if you need to drive around a little bit, you're not damaging your new plugs. Just keep the old plugs in, go get whatever parts you need so you can change the valve cover gasket. And once that's changed, then go ahead and swap out your plugs. And then if there's water or anything else in there, you'll need to look for possible causes that could be doing that. There might be a bad seal somewhere for water to be getting in there. All right, we got that. So let's go ahead and remove the plug and we'll get our new one in. Now you're going to want to grab your special spark plug socket as well as a pretty long extension, and then carefully go down there. Try not to gouge inside the cylinder. And these might have been over tightened. Oh, there we go. Definitely over tightened. This is why you gotta do torque specs. You can actually damage your plugs if you over tighten them, and your cylinder head. Once the plug is fully loosened, it'll pull right out with your socket. A magnetic socket works a lot easier to keep the plug intact. Sometimes the sockets, if you don't have a magnetic one, will fall off and gets down there, and then you'll have to go and get like a needle nose pliers. I don't have a magnetic one. I want to get one, but I don't have one yet. So I'm just going to very gently pull it up. All right, so here we have our plug. Let's pull it out of the socket here. All right, now sometimes when you change plugs, people will put the wrong types of plugs in and things like of that nature. You can always, try to inspect the type of plugs that you have. You can learn a lot by how the diodes look, if they're ashy, if they're, burnt away. all kinds of different things, so that way you know if you're running lean, if you have oil in there, things of that nature. If it's running too hot, if your engine's overheating, your spark plugs can tell you that too. But this is how mine looks here compared to a brand new spark plug. Get that for your comparison. Now, these were BMW ones that were in there. Now, it's possible they changed them out at the dealership. It's also possible these could be the original ones from 20 years ago. I have no way of knowing, but we got ourselves our replacement platinum plug right here that we're going to go ahead and put in to that cylinder, close it all up, and then move on to number 2. All right, now before you would put your spark plug in, you would want to get the proper measurement of the diode with your gap to make sure your gap is correct. Now, unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to check the gap because mine have 4 and there isn't any gap for me to get in there to test it. And I don't want to change the gap and damage. These are a different style platinum plug. I haven't seen the 4s like this before. Whenever I've changed spark plugs, it's always just had the single little diode on top, and those are easy to check the gap on. I've never seen these 4-ways before, so I'm not sure how to check the gap on these properly without damaging them, so I'm just going to leave them alone. Now, like I said, it is always recommended to check the gap. The manufacturers will try to always make sure that the gap is correct on their plugs, but sometimes there will be slight deviations from that. That's why you always want to check your gap. But I don't know how I don't know how I do it on these. These are because there's this plastic piece. There's this plastic piece right there, and my gap tool hits that, so I can't get it in there properly to check the gap. So I don't want to damage my plugs. I'm just going to have to put in faith that NGK has them gap properly. And if anybody knows how you test these 4-way spark plugs, please leave a comment so that way I'll know how to do that in the future. All right, before I put my plug in the cylinder, I'm going to apply a little bit of this boot protector right along in here with a Q-tip. I'm going to go right along in here, and then we'll put some on the inside of the boot. You don't need to apply a lot here because it's mostly just to go inside the boot itself, but I just want to have a little bit here just to ensure that we have some on there because this stuff not only is going to make it easier to remove the oil next time, this stuff also helps make sure that you'll have a waterproof connection, so that way if you do end up having like a leak with one of your seals, or I don't know, maybe you have to do some work on your car in emergency and it's raining and some water gets under the hood, or maybe you're cleaning the engine bay, what have you, and you don't want water getting down in there. So I want to make sure we waterproof this really, really well. So let me go ahead and get it in it, like I said. Now, if you have a plug that needs anti-seize, you would put it right on the threads. You would rub some anti-seize on the threads. NGK does not need anti-seize. So we're just going to go ahead and install it. I'm going to put a little bit of this boot protector right along in here where the boot makes contact here. Just a little bit, not a lot, because I don't want it all coming off into my socket. All right, just a little bit. All right, let's put it back in. Just carefully put it right back inside the spark plug socket. It'll snap in place. Now I'm going to turn it by hand a little bit just to make sure that I am going in without any resistance. I want to make sure it's going in straight. If it's not screwing in properly, then back it out. Do not reverse thread it. All right, starting to feel a little snug. Put the socket wrench on. All right, and it's snug. So this is where we'll do the torque. Now, in case you forgot, 22 foot-pounds. So here's my torque wrench, and I have it set at 22. I want to make sure that mine is calibrated correctly because I put my torque wrench at 10 foot-pounds and see if it clicks on 10 before I risk over tightening this. And there it clicked. All right, so it worked at 10. Now we'll put it up to 22. There we go. And then pull that out. And now we grab our coil. And what we're going to do is we're going to take some more of that boot protectant and we're going to put it along on the inside here so that way it'll be easier to remove this down the road, because I shouldn't have had to use two hands and all my might to get that out. Just make sure that your boot is clean. Don't have any oil or anything on it. And then we'll just rub a little bit of this on the inside here. Don't touch the metal piece down inside. Just enough on the inside so that way it'll come off a lot better. All right. Now we can go ahead and snap that one in place. Push it down. Grab our two bolts. And then go ahead and plug in your connector. Make sure that clicks in, and then just push down on that, and that will snap in place. And get the second one on. Don't over tighten these. I'm just getting them snug and going a little extra. I don't want to over tighten. Snug and then a little extra. Just a little. Just a little. All right. Perfect. All right. One done. 5 to go. So all you would do is just repeat the process that we just did all the way down the line. Went ahead and I got 1 through 5 changed out. Not a problem. I did notice on cylinder 2, I had some fresh oil on the threads of the plug. So I have to keep, I'm gonna have to keep an eye on that. I might maybe be at the early stages of my valve cover gasket going bad. So I got to keep an eye on that. Right now I'm on cylinder 6 at the back here. And I just want to show you all that there is clearance to get down there straight without having to remove anything. Just make sure you have a long extension and just drop it right in between the wires here, and you'll fit in there nice and straight. I also had to use a breaker bar to loosen it because that one was really tight and there isn't a lot of clearance. So a breaker bar made that a lot easier. So keep that in mind in case you might need one as well. But if you have a long enough extension, you can fit right between these wires and this little this harness piece here, and you can get a straight shot straight down, because you definitely want to make sure whenever you're changing these out, you want your extension to be as straight as possible so you do not thread your plugs in on an angle. All right, so I got the plug out from cylinder 6, and I just want to point this out. I've had some like dried on oil on all of the threads. On all of the threads except for cylinder 2 was fresh oil. Now cylinder 6 has a little bit of fresh oil on the top thread up here. So I definitely need to keep an eye on this. Another thing I want to point out is every single plug that I pulled out had already had some corrosion happening. So these definitely needed to be changed. The main reason why I am changing these is because, first off, I don't know when they've been changed. And second of all, my engine was running rich because I had that vacuum issue. So I went ahead, I fixed the vacuum issue. So now I need to go ahead and replace my plugs and my oil so that way we're good to go there, because I know I got a little extra fuel mixed in. So this is step 1 is getting the plugs out, and then I got to do the oil. But yeah, these definitely have been in there a while with that corrosion. So good thing they're coming out. Have all 6 replaced. Just do a real quick wipe down, get all the fingerprints off. Hands are starting to get a little sweaty, starting to warm up now. Now, a very, very skilled mechanic can probably change out all these plugs in under 30 minutes. It took me, with filming, a couple hours, just because it's just having to move the camera and then constantly changing things. You should be able to do this under 30 minutes, as long as things aren't over tightened and you're not running into any issues. Let's go ahead and put the engine cover back on, and then we'll go over some more details that you need to know. And again, just wipe away any fingerprints. All right, next step, which actually should have been done before I completely closed it up, was start the car to make sure all of the cylinders are firing. Don't make the mistake of closing up like I did. Just know that start your car first before you fully close it off, just in case maybe one of your spark plugs wasn't screwed in straight and it's misfiring. You can quickly, get to it and correct it. Now, if you're not certain when you should be replacing your spark plugs, the rule of thumb is spark plugs need to be replaced every 20 to 40,000 miles, and that's going to be determined based on what are you doing. Are you, driving it heavily? You taking it on the racetrack? You just doing a daily driver to work? Is it a garage clean? Things like that. It's also going to come into play as to what kind of plugs does your car have. Copper plugs are going to not last as long, so that's going to be more around your 20,000 mile mark, whereas iridium plugs last the longest. I have platinums in mine, so I'm in mid-tier. So just keep that in mind as well. Otherwise, if you are noticing any other issues with your car, if you're not getting proper spark or misfiring, that would be another determining factor to go ahead and change your plugs. Possibly it might even be your coils that could be bad. So go ahead and do an inspection and see what you need to change. Other than that, it's a very easy process. go ahead and do it yourself. Save some money. Don't go to a dealer. And thank you so much for watching my video. I really do appreciate it. I got plenty more things to come. As you saw from my Christmas holiday video, I got a lot of stuff that I got to do yet on the Z3. So plenty more videos coming your way. So stay tuned for those. Please go ahead, give this video a like, a subscribe to it if you haven't already. Love to have you come back, tell your friends, all that good stuff, as well as check out my Instagram at CoolCatTerry. Thanks again, and I'll see you hopefully real soon.